Hi, folks. Today we're talking about 7 reasons why science fiction is dying or maybe already dead. I'm going to tell you about 7 trends that I see in contemporary science fiction. Not all of them are present in all sci fi, but these are definite trends. Some are newer than others have been around for a while. And let me say that I love sci fi, and it breaks my heart to see these trends in one of my favorite genres and to see science fiction dying. Now, before we get to the 7 trends, I do want to mention my sponsor today, 220 Publications, and one of their great books. This is the novel Time Signature by Carlo Kennedy, and I hope you'll check it out. This is a time travel historical fiction novel where the time machine is driven by music. It's the only story I know of where the time machine is driven by music, and you're going to love all the great 80s references and all the musical elements. So if you love time travel, if you love historical fiction, if you love music, get Time Signature by Carlo Kennedy. Okay, reason number 1 why science fiction is dying or possibly already dead. The first reason is that the genre of science fiction has been mixed up and combined with the genre of fantasy. And this is a huge problem, in my opinion. I think we need much clearer definitions between sci fi and fantasy. Now, look, all fantasy deals with the fantastic. That's why it's called fantasy. So, all fantasy deals with things that are actually impossible in real life. And my son, who has 2 master's degrees in English literature and has some great theories about genre, he will tell me that sci-fi is a subgenre, right, of fantasy in which the fantastic elements are explained with quasi-scientific language and explanations. And that makes a lot of sense. But it's a problem for me when something that I expect to be sci-fi also contains elements of fantasy that are not explained with quasi-scientific explanations. So for me, I think sci-fi needs to be defined as a genre in which the impossible elements are explained in a way that makes them plausible in this universe, right? Whereas fantasy assumes a different universe with different natural laws, things like magic, right? So in a fantasy piece, you're asked to suspend reality and just accept that this alternate universe, right, exists with all these rules as they will explain them to you in some long expositional aside or some dry voiceover that will go on, and you're not supposed to ask why or how those rules exist or who enforces them. Science fiction, on the other hand, right? Science fiction says, okay, we're going to explain to you the possible elements with pseudoscientific lingo so that they seem plausible in this universe. We don't have to put you in a different universe, right? Even if it would be only in the distant future, the point is that these things are made plausible in this universe, right? And so by these definitions, I'm really only interested in sci-fi. I'm not interested in fantasy. Now, that's okay if other people are. It's fine if people like both, but I don't think you can do both in one story. You gotta decide, is it sci-fi or is it fantasy? And if you try to do both in the same story, I'm sorry, Dr. Strange, it doesn't work. Reason number 2 why science fiction is dying or possibly dead. Science fiction has gone too far toward the occult and into what's called Gnosticism. Gnosticism is an ancient heresy which assumes that there's this great divide between the material and the spiritual, and that the material is somehow inherently inferior or even evil, whereas only the spiritual is good. And of course, the whole point behind that is that evil exists in the material world, but there really is no God in the spiritual realm. And so, magic is real, but there are no miracles. If that means, the divine intervention of an intelligent creator who favors good over evil, right? And so there seems to be this intolerance of providence, right? It used to be that it was okay if coincidence favored the hero. Because it was not really coincidence, it was providence, it was divine justice. God was looking out for the hero. The old Deus ex machina. Nothing wrong with that, right? And it was an implicit affirmation that God does exist, God does sometimes intervene, or at least God cares that good wins out over evil and sometimes works it out so that the hero wins the end, right? But in fantasy and in the way science fiction has been going recently, we have this situation where there are rules in the universe and there are even consequences, but no one ever bothers to ask who made these rules, who enforces these rules, right? There are rules, but no one to enforce them. The rules are simply forces of nature in an alternate universe. And then also going beyond that, there is this disturbing trend where the spiritual is pitted against the physical, the mental against the bodily, right? And so we get stories like Altered Carbon and even Upload, which I love, but it defines the human being as a mind only, and the body is something to be discarded as inferior, or the consciousness can be uploaded into a computer, or the consciousness can be traded from one body into another, right? All of that sort of takes the bodily element out of who we are as human beings. Now, I'll have more to say about the humanity in sci-fi in a minute, but that's the second reason why sci-fi is dying. The third reason why science fiction is dying or perhaps already dead is that it has become a kind of religion, or it proposes science as a kind of religion in which science is our savior and replaces God. And you can see this in the way that, well, Scientology was science fiction that became a religion, or in the way that people will claim to belong to the Church of the Jedi, as taking on the sort of quasi spiritual elements out of Star Wars, right? Science fiction used to be a cautionary tale about the dangers of playing God. Now it's become a kind of religion in which science is God, scientists are priests, and the goal is to kind of celebrate our own divinity. Salvation is sort of redefined as something like saving the planet from humanity, right? It's not humanity that needs to be saved, it's the earth that needs to be saved, and it needs to be saved from humanity. This also gets into the question about alternate or multiple universes. And I am so tired of the whole multiverse thing. I think it's just like a complete cop-out because it's the result of not knowing where else to go with all of this, right? But to me, the whole idea of multiple universes or alternate universes misses the very important point that if we trust God, we have to assume that this is the best possible universe, right? This and by the way, this is actually one of the arguments of atheism, which is to sort of start with the problem of evil and then say, well, if there was a God, he could make a better universe than this one, and a universe with no suffering, etc. And since he didn't make a better universe than this one, then there must be no God. But of course, all of that completely misunderstands and misses the point of free will, right? I mean, you cannot have a universe with free will that at the same time does not have sin, because true free will allows you to reject God's will and sin. So, given the fact that free will is important to God because God is love and love is always voluntary, right? There has to be free will. So, all that in mind, this is the best possible universe, right? But the point is that, the human ability to imagine a better universe or even a different one, well, that's an interesting idea to explore in sci-fi, right? And it's only going to keep coming up a lot more, right? But again, where is God in all this? If we assume that there are multiple universes, where is God? And if we assume that this universe that we are in is not the best of all possible universes, what does that say about our Creator? Not that all sci-fi has to be Christian per se, but these are important questions. Okay, reason number 4 why science fiction is dying or possibly already dead. Excitement has become valued over substance. Sci-fi used to be about the deeper philosophical questions of anthropology. What does it mean to be human? And when it's non-religious. I mean, like I said, it doesn't have to be all Christian, but even when non-religious, even when written by atheists, science fiction should raise important questions, right? But now what you've got is this the threat escalation just means it's become all about battling aliens, right? There's no more sort of earthly questions to wrestle with, and so now it's got to be all about aliens, but only if the aliens can be presented as colonizers and make some sort of statement, right? And to the extent that there are gods, there's no one god. There are pagan mythological gods who are tricksters and who can't be trusted. And so again, even when sci-fi is written by atheists, it used to ask the big questions. What is a human? What is humanity's purpose, or what is the end goal, the hope of humanity? What is wrong with humanity, and what would fix it? In other words, what is salvation? And what happens when humans play God or try to replace God with something else, like science? What is the relationship of creatures to their creator, or the relationship of humanity with creation? And what happens when the creature rebels against the creator? These are all the great, deeper questions of science fiction. Where are these questions now? Reason number 5 why science fiction is dying or possibly dead. Humanity is diminished. To the extent that science fiction does ask the anthropological questions, it diminishes humanity in several ways, by making animals or other elements of creation as important as humanity, or by presenting robots as potential humans. It diminishes the uniqueness of humanity. In fact, I don't know how this happened, but robots have somehow gotten ahead in line of the preborn as potential humans, right? So what humans create is somehow elevated to the same status as what God creates. But unlike the old cautionary tales, this is presented as a good thing, right? The idea of humans playing God is no longer a cautionary tale. It's a kind of evolution to the deification of humans becoming gods, right? Number 6, the 6th reason why science fiction is dying or possibly already dead. And this kind of follows along on the last one, right? Number 6 is humans are the virus. It used to be that for a while this was sort of the mantra of the antagonist, of the evil characters in the story. Humans have to be we have to get rid of all the humans, and somehow it became sort of the message of the heroes, or the implied truth, or sometimes the explicit truth. The idea that humans are the problem. That idea has gone from false to true in science fiction. So for example, look at the trajectory from Terminator, right, where the bad guys are the ones who want to eradicate humanity because the humans are the problem, to more recent films like the film 2067, where that's the truth that the story proposes, that the humans are the virus, and that the best thing for the earth would be to get rid of the humans, right? But again, humans are not the virus. Humans are the pinnacle of creation and ought to be the stewards of creation. And sure, have we failed in that job a lot? Yeah. And do we need to address that? Yes. But not to the extent of making inanimate or animal elements of creation as important as humans, and obviously not to the extent of sort of proposing this idea that what's really wrong with the earth is humanity. Last but not least, number 7, the 7th reason why science fiction is dying or perhaps already dead. That is, there is a double standard over what is ancient, right? So in the story, what do you do when you need to crack a code? You consult the ancient texts. Anything but the Bible, that is, right? Because the Bible's right out. So there's this weird fascination with ancient artifacts, but not with real ancient wisdom, right? If your parents or your grandparents knew about it, well, that's no good. It's not old enough. And it comes from Christian tradition, well, that's no good unless it subverts Christian tradition, right? Because real tradition, the kind that is handed down, the kind you would have to get from your parents and grandparents, well, that has no value. The ancient stuff has value precisely because it's been forgotten, right? But never mind the fact that, there are reasons why things get forgotten. things get forgotten because they didn't stand the test of time, right? But you get in these more contemporary stories this sort of implied idea that, well, the church is hiding something from you, and what you really need to do is figure out what that is. And so, we get that we get that vibe that in the stream of tradition, there are people who are keeping something from you. And so, what you really have to do is skip over your teachers. Truth is mediated not by your teachers, but by taboo texts that can be self interpreted, right? And so, again, there's this double standard over what is ancient, right? And if anybody else in recent history knew about it, it can't be good. Well, look, these are 7 reasons why I think that science fiction is dying or perhaps already dead. But I haven't given up on it. I still watch science fiction. I still hope to see good science fiction. In fact, when I wrote my book, From Star Wars to Superman, I talk about here how faith and science are not at odds. This is not an anti-science thing, but at the same time, science is not our savior. So I would invite people to check out that book, From Star Wars to Superman. I would also want to invite you to check out my locals community, where we have conversations like these. The comments on my videos are always turned off. So if you want to interact, if you want to get involved in the conversation, go to locals.com and look for the Original Church community on locals.com. That is a place for all Christians who are interested in ancient Christianity and who want to interact and get involved in the conversation. That's where we do all that. The bottom line is that I liked science fiction best when it was a cautionary tale about humans overreaching, science gone too far, the dangers of playing God. I mean, does that make me a Luddite? Does that make me an old man shaking my fist at the clouds? Well, I'm certainly not anti-science, but I am skeptical of technology, especially skeptical of robots making decisions for me. And, I do believe that maxim that says that just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. Jurassic Park, another great cautionary tale. One final note. A happy ending or a hopeful ending validates the belief in God, in providence, and in ultimate justice. And people who don't believe in these things write stories with darker endings or just darker stories in general. And I'm not saying that's all bad. I mean, there is a legitimate sort of blues factor, right? Misery loves company, and that's not necessarily wrong to explore that in a story. But art should inspire, not produce despair. Culture and current events produce enough despair. And you might say art should imitate life, and I would say yes, but in the sense that it is life-giving. Dark stories and dark endings where evil wins or where it's ambiguous, these things just validate atheism. And, traditionally, natural law assumes the existence of God and that providence is real. That is traditional natural law. And traditional natural law assumes that creation is oriented toward a telos, an end that includes both justice and redemption. But there is a cultural push, I think, to redefine natural law without God as sort of the law of nature, and to redefine salvation as changing the world rather than changing yourself, or rather than yourself being changed, right? So it's a redefinition of salvation that says, you're fine the way you are, it's the world that has to change. There's no such thing as personal sin, only injustice, and salvation is when you find the virtue in yourself to protest against that injustice, and then you become one of the saviors, right? And I think that trend is really problematic, and I'm seeing it more and more in science fiction. As I said in my book, From Star Wars to Superman, some science fiction wants you to believe that evil exists, but God doesn't. And I'm not saying that all sci-fi has to be Christian, but right now I want to call out to Christian fiction writers, how about some more Christian sci-fi? How about it, Christian authors? Let's have some Christian sci-fi. That's what I'd like to see. Let me know if you know of any, and I hope to hear from you. And come and visit me on locals.com, the original church on Locals. Hope to see you there. Hey, thanks for watching. Well, you know the drill. Subscribe, notifications, blah, blah, blah. But if you liked this video, please share it. And if you want more, consider getting one or more of my books. Or better yet, join me and the original church community on locals.com. There you can comment and interact with the rest of us. I hope to see you there.